All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to OpenInfra Live. This is the Open Infrastructure Foundation's interactive show that we do every week on YouTube, Facebook, and of course, LinkedIn. So we're streaming everywhere we can reach to connect with the community. And this has been an awesome experiment we've been running this year, and the results are in, and we want to talk about it today. We're super excited. You know, this show we started back in April. And it's been an incredible opportunity for us to connect with all of you out in the open infra community, all the open source folks around the world. And so we started this back in April, and we've been able to connect with tens of thousands of people. I think we're up to almost 30,000 views now across all the episodes. So really, I want to give a lot of credit to everyone in the community and our team and our foundation staff who really started to think at the beginning of this year about how can we connect with community when we can't get together? How do we sort of take some of the things we're missing without being able to do an in-person summit in 2021? And how do we come up with a format that's interactive and fun? And so it's been an awesome year. We've been doing this every week. This is actually our 31st episode today. So one of the things we're going to do today is really look back at the year and pull up some fun clips and just talk about some of our favorite moments. But hopefully all of you have had a chance in the past to participate, join in some of these episodes. And so drop your links in the comments or your comments in the chat about your favorite moments from this year. And of course, we're looking forward to next year. You know, we've had, as I said, 30 episodes. This is 31. You know, we typically get about 100 people live, and then, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000, watch over the next month once the episodes are live. So that's kind of the recap of how the show has been going in terms of the numbers. But the more fun parts are to come on today's show, and we're going to bring on some awesome guests to talk about their moments, the laughs, the tears, whatever we've been able to experience this year together every single week on OpenInfra Live. Now, in addition to the weekly episode, one of the things we did a few weeks ago was we produced something a little bit bigger, better, expanded edition called OpenInfra Live Keynotes. So this was 2 days, about 2 hours a day. This was our big virtual event, if you will, for the year. And we really wanted to take this format, this kind of interactive online live streaming format, and make it even bigger. We had all kinds of incredible guests, and part of today's episode will be looking back at some of our favorite moments from the OpenInfra Live Keynotes episode. So we did have people from 70 countries. So that's even more than we typically get when we're in person, right? So being online is not always the same or as fun sometimes as being together in person, but it does give us the ability to connect with more people in more countries. So the access is something that's a big upside to being able to connect online. So we've had 25,000 views to date, 80,000 minutes of watch time. So some of you are really watching a lot of minutes, and so I hope that you're getting a lot out of it. We're able to bring people on to educate all of us about what they're doing in open source with many different projects around infrastructure. We also did something really cool for all of our community members in China. We partnered with a company called Segment Fault, and we were able to actually translate the captions for all of the talks and stream it on that platform in China. And we got tens of thousands of people that tuned in. So that's kind of what we've been doing this year. The weekly show, we did the big keynotes back in November. And one of the things we did talk about in the keynotes is a new pattern we're seeing out in the usage of all this open source together, which is Linux, OpenStack, Kubernetes infrastructure, which happens to spell Loki, which is pretty cool. And so we introduced that concept and talked about it, and some people have been writing about it. There's been some articles in different publications. One of them just dropped yesterday talking about Loki, and we'll drop a link in the chat. This was from Stephen Von Nichols, so shout out for the great article. There's much more to it than the headline, of course, so make sure you actually read the article, as they say on Twitter these days. Don't tweet this if you haven't actually read the article. They try to get me with that all the time. So with that, I think that we are going to be bringing on our first guest which is Thierry Carrez, to talk about his favorite moments from OpenInfra Live this year, both the weekly show and, of course, the keynote. So welcome, Thierry.
Hi, Mark. It's a great pleasure to be here and reflect back on almost 1 year of OpenInfra Live. One of the shows I participated in was the large-scale SIG show, which we call the large-scale OpenStack show. It's basically about bringing together operators of large-scale deployments and get them to share how they solve a certain operational challenge and discuss between themselves like the different approaches to solving those problems. And it's been one of the most interactive shows that we've hosted. It's one of the most technical shows as well, obviously, because they go deep into the trenches and work on those problems that you reach at large scale, and it's very informative for other users. So we had maybe 5 or 6 shows for the large scale OpenStack show. If I had to pick, like one of my favorite episodes would be on episode 19. We discussed software-defined supercomputers. So we got a lot of architects, practitioners of high-performance computing to discuss their use of OpenStack in software-defined supercomputers. And one of them was Happy Sithole, the director for the Center for High Performance Computing in South Africa. And he discussed his choice of OpenStack as the platform to support computing infrastructure for the Square Kilometer Array project, which is a massive research project that is going to be built in the next 15 to 20 years, and how they bet on OpenStack to support that. So I don't know if we have the clip ready.
Yeah, I just one quick thing on that. We mentioned all the minutes watched this year for OpenInfra Live, and when I study that data, like these large-scale OpenStack episodes consistently get like the most views, the most minutes watched, like the most live viewers. I mean, people really, really love this stuff. And the Square Kilometer Array, one of my favorite things that I learned about that when they first started talking about how they were going to use OpenStack was that currently the largest machine in the world ever built by human beings is the Large Hadron Collider. So shout out to Bell Miro and Tim Bell and all our friends at CERN who run OpenStack at large scale. And this Square Kilometer Array, which is going to rely on OpenStack, is going to be even bigger. So, when that's complete, unfortunately, we'll have to knock CERN down to the second largest machine ever built, but luckily they'll all be running OpenStack. So there's a big tent, if you will. Anyway, enough about that. Let's go ahead and roll that clip, and we can see your favorite moment from that episode.
I wanted to ask you about something that's very obviously a big thing in South Africa, which is the Square Kilometer Array, the radio telescope, which is going to be half hosted in South Africa. Did you want to talk about how OpenStack is going to play a role in this sort of incredibly prestigious large-scale system?
Yeah, indeed, Stick. I think from our side, that has been one of the drivers for us to say we should be dragged into OpenStack kicking because of the massive computing that will be required for the Square Kilometer Array and done in different parts of the world. So the whole thinking around here was, how will we be able to build such a computer? Not one nation will be able to do that. And we might need some diversity of architectures that scientists can move across on those architectures. And the whole thing of OpenStack came in there, that if we get something as a layer that can be used across the world, and a user see just one big computer and navigate through that. That's the big idea that we have. And we believe OpenStack can be able to deliver on this. And hence, we started doing this from various countries so that we build a skill base that Sadaf talked about. And after that, then we can have this one big supercomputer sitting in different parts of the world.
All right. Well, that was a great clip. And I think, this is the first time we've ever tried to drop clips in. So we'll see how well we're able to stream within the stream, get some inception going here. But the most important thing is to kind of give you some idea of some of the amazing talks that have happened. So you can go off and watch the whole episode for yourself. And we'll be sharing in the notes, or the description rather, on YouTube, links to every single talk that we're covering here. So you can go back later and watch the whole episode. But what is your other favorite moment, Thierry, from the weekly show? Did you have another one in mind?
Yeah, it was one that was more representative of what we did for the large scale SIG show, where we invited actually young and seasoned operators and developers to discuss specifically the topic of neutron scaling. Because neutron has been mentioned and one of the pain points once you reach a certain scale. And in that particular clip, we have Mohammed Nazer dropping some knowledge on what is best pro tips for watching neutron and how to react when it fails and what's the logical culprit. I feel like it was a great insight on someone that runs a massive OpenStack cloud to share his experience there. So maybe we can roll that clip.
Yeah, Mohammed has so much great knowledge, and he's been on the show a bunch of times. So let's see what he has to say about neutron.
So like I said, what are the common downsides failure of neutron? What do you have encountered, and what critical metrics did you monitor to see that everything was going down, and how did you act with this failure or downside?
I can start this up. So we got a couple things that we actually watch for when we're monitoring clouds, and especially how to know if neutron is doing the right thing or whatnot. So a couple.
So we are, I think, having some technical difficulties with our stream experiment. So what can I say? It's live. It's truly live. And that was Mohammed talking about neutron. I think that some of the things he shared were really critical based on not just theory as, somebody who's looking at the lines of code, but someone who's running it in production. So Mohammed, why don't you tell us, Thierry, a little bit more about Mohammed and why he's such a great resource for the community. And I believe you're on mute.
Mohammed is one of the most active operators in our community. So he's been sharing a lot of his experience in running OpenStack and bringing it back to the developers to improve the product. So it's really an example of a user getting involved in the community, producing the software more directly. Mm-hmm. And so it's really good that we have Mohammed being able to share is I would say the way he runs OpenStack for others to learn lessons from. And in that specific clip, obviously, he was sharing a few ways of how you would monitor neutron, how you would react when things start to fall apart. And it was a good example that anyone can check on by going directly to YouTube and watching the whole episode, because it was actually a great episode all around.
Yeah, I think, we're always talking about, as a foundation, our mission is to build communities who write software that runs in production. And so it's so integral to our community to have, of course, developers writing code, but also people running it production, and everybody sort of talking and bringing together operators and developers. And it's just a really important and, I think, unique aspect of our community. And Mohammed really exemplifies that. He's the founder and CEO of Vexos, and which is a public cloud based on OpenStack. And they typically are running like the latest release. So they're really on top of, upgrades. And of course, he's running a service 24/7, 365, a public cloud. So he can't afford to have issues with reliability. So he's such a great resource. But we will, I think, try to load up a different clip now. So one of the things that we did, as I mentioned in November, is we had an expanded episode called OpenInfra Live Keynotes. And one of my personal favorites was an interview that we had with Balaji, who knows a lot about decentralization. And I think that, it's kind of a hot topic these days, and anything that even has something remotely to do with blockchain or crypto certainly causes people to get really excited or mad, or, I don't know. It seems to bring out a lot of people's strong feelings, but I really like the way that he talked about it. And maybe rather than try to explain it, we'll try to roll the clip and see what he had to say about decentralization.
The thing is, decentralization, people often talk about it in quasi-religious terms. This is decentralized, this is not decentralized. They don't give a precise definition. And, a while back, I wrote an article called Quantifying Decentralization, which proposed an actual metric. And this metric is, we call it the Nakamoto coefficient. It's actually used by Solana, the rising, blockchain, as well as other chains. And the concept is, what is the minimum number of entities you need to compromise the entire system? Okay, so for example, you have a certain number, let's say it's a coin, okay? You have a certain number of exchanges where that coin is traded, you have a certain number of miners, you have a certain number of developers on the main client, you have a certain number of clients. How many entities, if you shut down 3 exchanges, would that bring the system to a halt? If you shut down 5 miners, would that capture more than 51% of the mining power? If there's only 1 client, could you get 3 developers and then there were only 5 developers, so you got more than 60% there? Basically, how many entities would you need to capture in order to capture the system? And while an imperfect measure, it does capture the fundamental concept that decentralization is continuous. It's not just a 0-1. You can keep increasing the amount of decentralization where you have to capture 10, 20, 100, 1,000 nodes. And B, it captures the concept that decentralization is based on the minimum number of entities you need to compromise at any choke point. So you might need to go and compromise 50 exchanges to compromise this coin, but 3 developers to do the trick. So you basically have, like about 3 people. Another way of thinking about it is your bus number is 3. And so it's basically a measure. It's like a choke point analysis, a robustness analysis, an enumeration of control points. It's how many nodes do you need to take down the system. That is a measure of how decentralized it is.
All right. I really like that, Tari, because I think, for starters, he acknowledges that there's can be kind of almost a religious vibe that people get. And we've obviously seen this back in the early days of open source. It still happens that people become very sort of black and white, like, yeah, it's got to be all open source or no open source, or, kind of get very rigid in thinking about things. And I think you see that absolutely in this sort of so-called Web3 world or whatever, blockchain conversations. And it seemed like he was proposing, has written up extensively about sort of like a spectrum of decentralization and ways to actually measure it and try to make it a little bit more of an analytical exercise, or maybe create some objective measures to determine, whether a system can be compromised depending on, the number of actors and things like that. So I thought that was kind of an interesting way to introduce the concept. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I like the fact that he would present open source on a spectrum of decentralization and like you said, have objective metrics to actually what that means, away from all of the traditional benefits that we associate with open source. If you look at it from the facet of decentralization, how does that actually compare to other forms of decentralization? I found that approach really interesting.
Yeah, and I think, if you look at the history of OpenStack, early on, and you were very, very involved in this, is, we talk about the 4 opens, ensuring that every sort of aspect of how the software is getting developed is truly transparent, open, inclusive. People can get involved in it even before any code's written, with open design. And, I think, and we have a very specific set of governance that, not to get into the whole rabbit hole on governance, but about it doesn't matter what company you work for, what country you're in, you're welcome into the community, and you can have a say, and you can rise up with open community. You can be a leader and be elected to become a PTL or be part of the technical committee, and those things are not in any way tied to kind of funding or who's writing a check or where your paycheck comes from. And I think that is a form of decentralization in terms of the power being in the hands of the community to determine, and the community being made up of those who show up and participate. So it's an ideal, and obviously we're always striving to reach those ideals, but I think that it's an important one, and you see kind of parallels with other conversations about decentralization. All right, I've rat-holed on that completely. So I know that you had a favorite moment from the keynotes. What was it?
Yeah, I actually really liked the Million Core Club award ceremony, because it really captured the fact that we saw dramatic growth in the size of existing deployments. We already knew that we had plenty of new users. We already knew that we broke the barrier of like more than 25 million cores of CPU power being driven by OpenStack. We knew that we had a growth in the variety of use cases, but it's also that the existing users are actually increasing their footprint, so doubling down on OpenStack when they already had a deployment. And so we're seeing in this fun award ceremony the best we could do in a virtual event where we would pass the trophy from one window to the other, and it was a very fun way of celebrating those users that actually grew beyond the million CPU core mark and accepted to talk about it. So China Mobile, Line before, I think Yahoo is next. And it was really a good moment to see how happy all of those users running OpenStack are, and the fact that we never knew we would get to 1 million cores total when we started this, and we ended up with 25 million with several users above the 1 million mark, which is completely crazy 10 years in.
Yeah, so we're not going to play this whole clip, but you can go find it. We'll be publishing the link to all the talks in the description on YouTube for everything we're playing today. But just to give you an idea of who some of these users are, it's Line, which is an incredibly popular messaging app and does way more than messaging. But they run over 1 million cores. Walmart, China Mobile, we just saw on screen. We were, as you said, kind of passing the award through the screen, through the magic of modern technology. China Unicom is actually somebody who just got added to the Million Core Club most recently, I think in the past few days. And so one of the really cool things about open source is we never know who's running it, how big of a cloud they have. So I imagine there are others out there running 1 million cores that we don't know yet. So China Unicom reached out to us when they saw that we had announced this, and they said, wait, we're in the club too. So, of course, Workday, one of the most successful SaaS companies in the world, and Yahoo has been, I think that they were saying a few years ago, you're going to have to create 1 million core club for us alone. And we said, well, let's wait till we have more. So we have a lot other companies as well, but welcome to everybody who's in this new amazing club. And I think we're only going to be adding more logos to the slide. So I think that is it for, I think we actually have one more clip, which was of Martin Casado, who is from A16Z, Andreessen, talking, and previously was a member of the OpenStack community. So why don't we roll that clip, and then we'll move on to our next guest.
Thing set up for the discussion is, if you're a large public cloud company, on average, your costs are 50% of the cloud, right? It's impacting your market cap by a few $1 billion. And that market is controlled by an oligopoly of 3 companies whose margins have increased from 18% to 30% over the last 10 years, right? And so it's quite unlikely that like you'll get much margin extraction out of that. I mean, oligopolies just don't work that way. So then the question is, you know, to your point, is what do you do about it? Is this something that you worry about early? Is this something that you just let the market take care of? Like what do you actually do about it? And I don't think there's actually a good answer for that. However, we are starting to see signs in the industry of people recognizing it and thinking about it quite early. So, for example, Suhail, who is the founder of, you know, Mixpanel, has created a new company called Mighty for exactly this reason. They're building their entire hardware stack. If you've watched what Cloudflare is doing, Cloudflare is taking direct aim at AWS and announcing things like R2, which is kind of an S3 competitor, by doing, you know, egress pricing. And so, again, I think the question is less, you know, if you are doing a startup, should you or should you not use cloud? The answer, of course, is yes, you must use cloud for sure. Like that's the only way to do modern development. I would never recommend anybody do not use clouds unless you're a core infrastructure component. Then maybe you should think earlier about that. And then once you start getting at scale, you may want to start looking at these alternatives. Like there are now these kind of niche clouds that are focusing on cost optimization in certain areas that you may want to consider using. And so I don't think, you know, the purpose of this piece was not to tell SaaS vendors to repatriate. It's to say that you've got $1 trillion that are locked into this unsteady truce with an oligopoly, and something's going to happen, and it's going to be big, and a lot of spend is going to be moving around, and I'm all for it.
Awesome. Well, I think, you know, he has really put together this crazy analysis, and it's very detailed. He's extremely analytical, so a lot of people have been sort of throwing stones at it, but it's held up pretty well. And there was just an article in The Economist, which is quite a popular publication, quoting Martin's analysis and quoting a database vendor whose half of their costs are going to a hyperscaler of the entire company, half of their total costs of their whole company. So I think he's raised an interesting point here, and you know, we have to think about economics, right, Thierry? What do you think?
Yeah, and I encourage everyone to watch the whole clip, because it was really interesting to see him deconstruct the economics of cloud and capex and opex, and how that all plays out in terms of like the financials for a company, and when it makes sense to do more outsourced cloud, when it makes sense to repatriate, and was really an interesting clip and an interesting article. So I encourage everyone to watch and read.
Yeah,
Martin
get
Casado
on Twitter and mix it up. He loves to hear about it on Twitter. All right, so I'm being told that I am talking too much and we are behind schedule. So thank you, Thierry. I need to switch to bringing Ildiko Vancha on to talk about some of the awesome episodes that she participated in, or you know, and and loved this year. Welcome, Ildiko.
Thank you. I also brought some holiday vibes since we are so close to Christmas and a little bit of downtime to the end of this year. If anyone wants to know where to get this virtual background, reach out to me after the show. I can tell you where I bought all the stuff that's hanging around and on that fireplace like thingy that keeps me warm right now. But back to Edge, because I'm so excited that I'm literally sitting on the edge of my area rug right now in my living room. So 2021 was still a bit of a challenging year, but on the other side of this, these challenges kind of kept being motivational in the area of edge computing. So when it comes to Edge, I think we got another really good year in with a lot of activities, production deployments, new industry segments rolling in. So I think it is really, really exciting. You can see some statistics on the slide right next to us because, well, at least most of the people that I know are obsessed with data. So we are running surveys, and the one that you can see on the screen is a user survey data for the StarlingX project. StarlingX, if you happen to not know, then you're on the naughty list of Santa. But go check it out on starlingx.io. all information is there about the project. What you need to know now is that it's a fully integrated open source cloud platform. It is fine-tuned for edge computing and IoT use cases, and it is integrating projects together like OpenStack, Kubernetes, and many other awesome open source tools and projects that you probably heard of. And it also adds some new components to fill in gaps that are delivering features and functionality that is crucial when you go out to the edge, when you have large-scale deployments, because you're moving everything you have out of the data center. However, you are still keeping that central data center and adding a lot of sites connected to it. So the data next to us is really showing the industry segments where edge computing is really taking off, and telecommunication companies are having their rollouts for 5G radio access networks. And before we go into talking about the operator and user experiences and segments, our first clip is actually about why we are having yet another edge project, because the edge space is full of open source and standardization projects and activities. And our first clip features Paul Miller, CTO of Wind River, who explains why StarlingX was brought to life, and why open source and open infrastructure is so crucial for edge computing.
For the next decade of open infrastructure as this incredible ground for innovation and collaboration across the world, and companies and countries. So it's just an exciting kind of next phase when we think about where we're going as a community.
Yeah, you touched on some really important things there, Mark, and I think that some of the things you mentioned are actually the genesis, the reason for StarlingX within the Open Infrastructure Foundation. Why create a completely new open source initiative? And there's some real reasons behind that. As you walk through that, you think about these thousands of distributed sites. You think about a service provider deploying virtual 5G infrastructure, or as you mentioned, in manufacturing with robotics and lights out manufacturing, or augmented reality for servicing things. You're talking thousands of distributed sites, and we of course are coming off of a bunch of years of activity around OpenStack and use of Kubernetes in those environments, right, as we move towards more cloud native approaches. However, they were really, we built those technologies together as a monolithic environment, right? It was run in one data center, and we had a lot of challenges getting, Nova, Glance, Neutron, Keystone, all these components to work together and build the virtualization tool set that we would use to build a private cloud, right? But now, as we look towards the new problem of a highly distributed system, it's a distributed cloud with edge compute. Now, in order to run that, if you're a business trying to run that, you've got thousands of sites you have to manage as one distributed environment. And that fundamental new set of requirements is what drove the existence of StarlingX to say, how do we reuse technologies like OpenStack and Kubernetes and solve that distributed problem? And new innovative ideas happen in that open source activity around distributed control planes and self-healing networks and things like that, that fully embrace the problem of a distributed edge cloud. And that to me is what's exciting about StarlingX, is it's kind of the next generation that still has as its foundation OpenStack and Kubernetes and those type of technologies, but is now taking a fresh look at the way you deploy highly distributed systems.
All right. Well, that was a great clip. Paul Miller is always a great guest and a great speaker. If you want to have him at your event, always try to get on his schedule. So what else did you think was great moments in OpenInfra Live this year, Ildiko?
Honestly, that episode that we played this clip from was amazing from start to end. So I really encourage everyone to watch the whole thing. It was about an intelligent edge survey. That was the context for the whole clip. And we have such great, amazing content throughout the whole hour that helps people understand what edge computing really is all about, what are the needs, what are the requirements, and how we are working towards in collaboration with adjacent communities, and of course the projects that the OpenInfra Foundation supports, like how we are taking steps together to get closer to solutions. I had a really hard time to even pick moments from that episode. So the next one is also from that. It brings us towards the telco operators that I mentioned, because when it comes to connecting those thousands of sites, you really need that connectivity. So obviously telecom operators are pioneering the edge computing space, and I think everybody is learning about 5G. Just watch TV for half an hour and there are like 50 5G announcements and advertisements out there. So everyone heard of 5G, but not many people know what's behind it. So we have Paul Miller up again, and he will tell us about what a RAN is and why it is so important, and what do StarlingX and all the other open source projects do with it.
That's the stage we're in now, right? The project's graduated. It's stable enough that customers are starting to deploy it. And it's a really great time to jump in and participate in that exciting growth that happens from the, that kind of really nice inflection point that an open source project has when it becomes kind of real, I guess is the right thing. In the early days, it's like, hey, this is a great idea, let's go play with it. But now it's a real thing. It's in production deployment with customers using it.
So you're talking about Verizon, Vodafone, T-Systems. I mean, these are companies that I think, probably everybody's heard of, and they're different parts of the world. But if you haven't, these are massive players in telecom. And you're talking about Verizon, and I think some of the other examples, specifically about the RAN. And I think this is really cool to me. I mean, the early days of OpenStack, first of all, we had no clue that it would ever get used by any telecom operators for anything. And the fact that now, like 9 of the top 10 telcos in the world, run OpenStack, and now they're and we think of that more sort of in terms of the traditional compute, and that it's moving in to the network and that moving the packets for the network. But the RAN is a whole nother level that, again, we have no idea that it would eventually kind of be utilized in that way. But maybe you can explain what is a RAN, because to me, I mean, that's something I had to learn about over the last couple of years as StarlingX came along. Wind River started getting these awesome wins, Verizon's RAN for their 5G. Like, what is a RAN?
Yeah, so RAN stands for a radio access network. And in a 5G context, that's broken down to a set of logical software functions, the RU, CU, and DU in particular. As you move towards the edge of the network, it starts at the CU right after the 5G core. 5G core, of course, has an architecture that the 3GPP has standardized. You can go look at all those software components in that architecture at that standards community. It then flows down to the CU centralized unit, the DU, the distributed unit. The DU is directly driving the radio unit at the cell tower. So for the first time ever, you've now got service providers moving to an architecture where every single asset is becoming software-based that they use to run their networks from the core. And there's a lot, as you mentioned, a ton of OpenStack use there as that industry went through a transformation called NFV, or Network Functions Virtualization, years ago. And so OpenStack and virtual machine usage is dominant as they transform the core of their network. Now RAN, or vRAN, the virtualized RAN, which is the way of doing it with pure software functions, is bringing virtualization both with OpenStack and with cloud native approaches like Containerd runtime and Kubernetes orchestrators, et cetera, out to the very far edge of the network. And what StarlingX is doing for the first time is combining both of those technologies and embracing the distributed problem. StarlingX is a little unique in that it supports a containerized version of OpenStack inside a Kubernetes framework. And this allows people to run core data centers with high VM scale, because the VMs aren't going away anytime soon, right? There's been a lot of investment to move things to virtual machines. So you still need that high scale VM support. But as you go to the edge of the network, people are building things with the more contemporary approach of cloud native microservices, containerized architectures. And so Kubernetes and Containerd runtimes, for example, tend to be more utilized at the edge of the network where greenfield activity is happening. And so that's what RAN is, and how vRAN kind of maps into the technologies we're talking about from the Open Infrastructure Foundation.
Yeah, Ildiko, seeing these clips, I'm glad I'm wearing a different shirt, but I feel like, have I just been trapped in this office for 2 years? Like, is this where I live now? I don't know. It's giving me weird vibes. But last thing I want to mention about StarlingX is that we talked about Loki earlier, Linux, OpenStack, Kubernetes infrastructure, and it's not actually a new thing. It's a new sort of acronym that I think Jonathan Bryce dreamed up to, make me laugh, and it worked. But it's also clever, I guess you could say, Loki. But it's really what most people are running when we talk about to OpenStack users. Most of them are running Linux and Kubernetes, and StarlingX is actually a path to running Loki. So people that are running StarlingX are running Linux, OpenStack, Kubernetes for their infrastructure. So just to connect those two concepts, one of the ways people get into production, whether it's RAN or all these other use cases that Paul Miller likes to talk about. And we're about to hear from another user, I believe, up next from the OpenInfra Live keynotes. So what was your favorite moment, Ildiko, from the keynotes?
Well, if I tell you, then people will probably think that I like watching my own face in these clips, because
there's nothing wrong with that.
I hosted a panel where we had representatives from Vodafone, Wind River, and Dell. And this panel was about, again, the radio access network context, the Open RAN rollout that Vodafone has in Europe, and what role projects like StarlingX play in it, since Vodafone is using StarlingX for their RAN infrastructure, which is really exciting. So that panel, and when Andy Duncan talks about why StarlingX and open source is so important for them as telco operators, that was my favorite moment from the keynotes. I always love to hear users and operators talking about why they are using our project, why they are using and participating in open source. I don't think you can pick a better moment than that. Is a leader in Open RAN. They are having their rollout in the UK currently, which happens to be the first commercial Open RAN rollout in Europe, which is really, really exciting. And they are using StarlingX as part of their infrastructure. So Andy, I'm turning to you. What are your goals for Open RAN in the future, and what do you expect how it will affect your business?
So we've been working on the Open RAN platforms now for in excess of 5 years. It's been a remarkable journey, which I'm glad to say a wide portion of the industry is following us on as well. And it's really looking at how we move from where we are today to drive a more open ecosystem in the provision of RAN networks, to drive more competition within the marketplace, introduce new vendors to that, to support us in our objectives of bringing the very best services to our customers. And as we move into 5G and the deployment expands across our markets, we see our customers are having much more specific requirements in terms of the services and applications that they're wanting to see running. So the flexibility of open source solutions, the community that we see developing those solutions and really helping us to drive innovation, which is critical to meet the demands of our customers, are all very much in line with our core objectives for Open RAN. So, in summary, it's about broadening the ecosystem, it's about accelerating research and development, and then really using the community to drive innovation to deliver the services to our customers. So the synergies there are really strong, and we do see now increased support from many vendors and many of the industry open source communities to really focus on Open RAN and deliver the type of products that we need.
All right. Well, that was great, Ildiko. Thank you for coming on the show today and sharing some of your favorite moments from OpenInfra Live, and of course, our special keynote episode. So thanks again. We're going to have next on the show, Jimmy MacArthur. So Jimmy, welcome to the show. What have you been dying to tell the audience about from your many, many hours of watching OpenInfra Live this year?
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I did. I had a clip kind of lined up, but honestly, my favorite thing that happened this year so far is Ildiko telling us about her Christmas lights. So
That's
we
true.
could rerun
Can we
that.
get a quick
or,
edit? Hold on.
But
I'm
no.
talking to the studio.
No, I actually, the clip I have is about something that I'm a bit passionate about, which is about sustainability and green hardware. We had a great discussion with Zach Smith from Equinix and folks from Intel and Ampere as well. But this particular clip also features one of my favorite callers. This guy is in every episode, it seems like, John from Texas.
Oh, wow.
And he
I
asks,
hope he's on today. I mean, if he's not, is it even an episode?
I mean, this guy, he's a super fan, I think we could say.
Is he stalking you? Do I need to have a word with him?
I wouldn't go that far. It's hard to say, though. But he asks a really good question about hardware standards that we're trying to set for green data centers and sustainability versus the kind of specialized chipsets that are being developed. But I'll let him and Zach take it from here.
Opposing forces of standardized hardware and rack configurations versus increased demand for specialized hardware, GPUs, GPUs, et cetera, play into that push for portability.
I would love to take that one for 30 seconds. I personally believe we're in a more, although it would be convenient for us to say that we're going to have a homogeneous infrastructure, substrate that we could really build this scale around and whatnot, that we're actually going to have a very heterogeneous infrastructure world. That part of our job here is, like, as workload becomes more important, we're going to, Intel and Ampere are going to make specific chips that do one thing really well or do one thing best, right? Like, we're going to have accelerators and unique workload that happens much more, I'm going to call it not bell curve like, right? There's going to be the anti part of the bell curve. And I think that that's a huge opportunity. We have to recognize it versus push against it. Because right now in compute, we have this kind of commoditized 80% should run on all the same stuff thing. And it actually might flip, where more stuff, Laurent, is looking like HPC and less of it is looking generic. And so I believe that we have to work that into our standardization, not in terms of all computers look like this or all computer racks look like this or whatnot. And hence why I'm very focused on form factor. And I take inspiration from the PC world of ATX cases. You could put almost anything in an ATX form factor, and everybody knew how to build an ecosystem around that. If we could build an ATX case for, the mechanical sides of racks and whatnot, then we wouldn't be flipping and moving our power supplies from left to right and flipping and moving our, cables on our NIC from here to there, which creates massive complexity in the in-rack data center side. So maybe it's more, think about the area that we standardize in. Is it in the ATX case of the rack or wherever? And then allow lots of diversity within that. I think probably Ampere and Intel can speak more to being able to more fungibly use disaggregated components across the network or whatnot. That would probably make this a lot easier.
I love that clip, Jimmy, and that analogy to the ATX case. I mean, I've personally built, I don't know how many computers over the years, thousands, and what would I do without the ATX standard? Of course, they're all like smaller now, but maybe I'm dating myself. Oh my goodness. It's
John from Texas. John from Texas, everybody.
Oh man.
This all guy. Right.
Well, we're going to look into that. He sounds familiar. I know he's like a frequent guest of the show, or maybe he's just frequently in the audience. Well, wow, he is just all over the show. What else did you like this year? I know you were part of and then participated in the keynote. So was there something from the OpenInfra Live keynotes you wanted to highlight?
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's my second passion, as anybody knows, is public cloud. I love it. And you maybe pointed out that
out more, Jimmy.
I know it's sad, really. But you pointed out the ZDNet article earlier that talks about the expansion of the public cloud footprint and how OpenSec public cloud is actually larger than the hyperscaler public cloud footprints. And I just like to note that my episode came out before that article, so Maybe, I don't know, maybe they were watching, but
Wow.
this episode is with two awesome organizations out of Sweden, Bonero and City Network, and Victor Souza and Johan Christensen, talking about their cooperation and how they kind of take on those hyperscaler public clouds, and also what it means to have that big footprint. So here we go.
Building on what Johan said, do you think that OpenStack and OpenStack powered public clouds are starting to be in a competitive space with hyperscaler clouds? When you look at the footprint, it's huge. Is it larger?
Absolutely. I mean, OpenStack is really the alternative, right, for the ones that are looking for an open source solution. And as you were saying, if you look at the public cloud market today, there is a very strong need for an alternative for local cloud solutions, right? For solutions that are provided out of your country or out of your own region, let's say Europe, for example, right? So there is a strong need, there's a strong growth, and I think the whole, the principles of OpenStack, of openness, are really, really well aligned with the needs of data privacy, right? You want to make sure that you know what's running, you want to know what the code is, you want to know what's behind the curtains, and all of the transparency that you have with OpenStack really allows you to build a public cloud on those bases, on those premises, right? So completely agree with you on, and I think the growth that we see is just the beginning, really. I think we're going to see more and more of that.
Yeah, so speaking of growth, the two of you are City Network, Bonero, you're in the same market. And when I spoke to Bonero originally, I mentioned City Network as a competitor, and you stopped me and said, we don't see ourselves as competitors, we see ourselves as collaborating to use open source to bring a public cloud solution to Sweden. So, why are you collaborating instead of competing?
I think there is a very strong, let's say, incentive for us to cooperate. And feel free to add here, Johan. So when I'm talking to customers, which I do quite often, migrating to a new cloud is sort of, getting married, right? It's a long-term commitment, right? You want to know who is on the other side, how that cloud behaves, what's behind the curtains, everything, right? And that process is sometimes, takes a little while to get a customer landed and decided on a certain cloud solution. So it's actually one of the strengths when I'm talking to customers to say, well, we want you to be with us on our own merits, right? We want you to be with us because we provide you with awesome services. And if you're not happy with our services, we have City Networks, our colleagues here, and there are plenty of other providers here in Europe that offer you exactly the same APIs, exactly the same software, right? That's the power of openness, really. And you can essentially, literally migrate your applications to another provider over a day. You don't need to rewrite your software. You don't need to make major changes to it. You can just migrate to another provider very easily. So I see strength in that. We're obviously cooperating in a market, and that is a very positive thing for our customers in the end of the day.
All right. Well, that was great. I love that your bold claims on OpenInfra Live are making it into articles, Jimmy. I think the journalists are listening. Not just John from Texas, but other more credentialed journalists. So thanks, Jimmy. I'm going to bring next on Allison Price to talk about her favorite moments from OpenInfra Live in 2021. Allison, take it away.
Wow, quite the setup. I don't know if I can follow that. So my favorite part of this, even just this year, was the explosive growth of OpenStack usage in production, partly because I just want to get everyone to say explosive growth, but always also because I love data. I think there's a GIF or GIF around there, around the world that has me talking about how much I love data. But I think that, seeing how much of an increase we had, that was 66% increase in production OpenStack compared to last year, and up to 25 million cores. Like, I was astounded. Spreadsheets don't lie, and I looked at it for a while to make sure that it wasn't. But just looking at all these different organizations and talking to them is one of my favorite parts about our community, and so that operators can learn from each other, but also so we can get more folks running OpenStack. And so on one of my episodes earlier this year, I sat down and talked to some of the users who had within their organization seen 100, 200% growth just year over year. And so one of those organizations that was also inducted into the 1 million core club earlier this month or last month was Line. So let's play the clip where I talked to Line about how large their OpenStack production cloud is and why they're seeing such tremendous growth.
I introduced OpenStack in Line in 2016. And Line is not just a messaging app, it's actually a complete level of communication and infrastructure. And we actually have around 189 million total users with Line. And the total number of daily messages are around 5 billion. And we have around 89 million active users in Japan itself. Line's workloads include not only Line Messenger, Line payments, games, music, live streaming, and other services, but it also includes several ways of how we can actually deal with the open infrastructure. And it includes, we actually have like Kubernetes workloads as well running on Line. And for the scale, I would like Yushiro-san to talk about it in the next slide.
Yes, actually, we have about more than 40,000 hypervisors. Oh, sorry, this is the data from the July. So actually more than 50,000 hypervisors and more than 74,000 virtual machines and more than over 30,000 physical servers are running in our private cloud called Beruda.
I would just like to add, from the Line's perspective, we also have initiative for the upstream. We introduced the Oslo Matrix recently, which was led by Jean San for the upstream part. And we are also trying to contribute as much as we can on that level.
Wow, I can't, seeing the million and billions on the slides and then seeing that since July you've added so many more hypervisors just to accommodate this traffic that y'all have. So what is driving this growth beyond or behind y'all's open infrastructure scale?
Yeah, so Line services, for example, banking, derivatives, digital comics, and a bunch of services running, and our end user count are growing day by day.
Mm-hmm.
We are supporting the company growth from the infrastructure layer.
And so what do you think is next for your OpenStack deployment? As you see the Line customer base continue to grow, what additional workloads do you foresee being run on your OpenStack cloud environment?
Yeah, next few years, we will expand some availability zones and other new region in order to support Line's workload growth. This will significantly increase the size of our OpenStack deployment in the next few years.
Wow. Well, that's incredible. I mean, I think one of the best things about having Line be in the community is that they share so much about the details behind their cloud, where they've run into struggles, how they've overcome them. So there's so much sharing going on in the knowledge, and you have done a great job of bringing them into the community, Allison.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and like you said earlier, there are so many users out there that we don't even know about. So I want to encourage you that I say this all the time every year, but please take the OpenStack user survey, even if you're just evaluating OpenStack or if you're using it in production or testing. It's great to get that feedback, pass it back to the upstream community, and then we can feature you on the show or at other upcoming events.
Yeah, and I think that they may even be a Loki user as well. We know they're part of the Million Core Club. We gave them the award, and if you go watch the Million Core video, they got one of those awards that we handed around, or I think we may have actually done a toast with them. I'm not sure, but but they're part of that club, and whether they even realize that they're actually running low-key as well. You mentioned Kubernetes in there, and of course OpenStack and Linux is all part of that. So just got to get that low-key plug in there. But yes, the user survey, we'll drop the link in the chat. So you always take the user survey and help make the software better. So you also were part of bringing OpenInfra Live keynotes to life. So did you have a moment that you liked the most from the whole OpenInfra Live keynotes, Allison?
It was definitely a hard one, but as much as I do love OpenInfra Live, nothing can replace an in-person summit. And so my favorite part of OpenInfra Live keynotes was when we brought in one of our community members from Germany who is hysterical. He's from one of the OpenInfra Foundation Gold members, T-Systems. And he kind of gave a sneak peek on how to best prepare for the OpenInfra Summit that we're going to be hosting in Berlin June 7th through 9th of next year. So let's hear from Niels on the Berlin Summit and what y'all should do to prepare.
Niels is heading to the OpenInfra Summit in Berlin. Niels loves everything about traveling, like making acquaintance with the friendly locals.
I love it.
Enjoying the local cuisine.
I love it.
Or capturing the sights and attractions.
I love it.
Using the amenities.
I love it.
Getting around like a Berliner.
I love it.
Discovering local fashion trends.
I love it.
Niels is joining his friends and colleagues at the OpenInfra Summit 2022.
I love it.
I love it.
It was so, I mean, it added a nice comedic effect to the OpenInfra Live keynotes. But like I said, I'm just excited to actually go back to Berlin. It's been over 2 years since we've had an in-person event. And I know, we've been able to interact with the global community on this show as well as others. But I'm really excited to be able to see everyone. Right now, registration is open, and so is the sponsorship contract. So you can go to openinfra.dev/summit to learn more about what to expect. The CFP is going to be opening in early January 2022. And so we have similar tracks to what we've had in previous summits, but one new track that we have is around hardware enablement for open source solutions. So we want to have folks talking about some of the different hardware requirements and really invite some of those folks from different communities to kind of come in and talk about what those requirements are for open source. But of course, all your other favorite tracks are going to return, like private and hybrid cloud, public cloud, which I'm sure Jimmy will submit every talk to because that's his passion. And then, of course, container infrastructure and some of the other key infrastructure use cases that open source technologies are advancing right now. So I'm super excited. Get your submissions in. We'll be publishing that in January. So yeah, great opportunity.
Right now, you can buy your tickets. You can lock in your sponsorships, get your booth sorted out. You're going to want to have a space and be part of that for all the companies out there in the ecosystem. And you can start thinking right now about what talks you want to submit in the CFP, because that's only a few days away. It'll be coming next month in January. So a lot of stuff to do to get prepared. Obviously, Nils gave you the most important steps. And, that video, speaking of Berlin, was actually produced by a company that Shari, who used to be part of the foundation and is always part of the community, helped produce a really fun video. And she knows all about what to do in Berlin. So we're going to be heading to Berlin in June, and we want to see every single one of you there. So get your tickets, get your sponsorships. So for OpenInfra Live, I guess as we look forward to next year, what are some things that we should be talking about or expecting, Allison?
Yeah, so one of the exciting things is OpenInfra Live is returning. So that's the one piece that everyone can look forward to in 2022. This is our last episode of 2021, so Happy New Year. But on January 6th, I will be hosting an episode around what some of the key highlights are from the OpenInfra community over the lapse of 2021. So we're going to hear about some of the production deployments across all of the projects hosted at the OpenInfra Foundation and different software advancements and things like that. So if you're interested in participating in that episode, please let us know at ideas.openinfra.live. But yeah, I'm really excited to be coming back to host that on January 6th. So make sure you tune in at 1500 UTC.
All right. Thank you, Allison. Thank you to everyone who joined today's episode, whether you are in the audience or you're one of the folks that came on and shared your favorite moments of the year. And I really want to just thank everybody in the community who has participated all year long in OpenInfra Live. We've had so many people in the community who've been on the show, have proposed talks. You know, we keep mentioning this ideas.openinfra.live. Really, really important to keep hearing from you. It's all about participation, right? That's the open source. Most important thing in open source is just participate. And we want to make this show one in which everybody who has a great idea and wants to come on and talk about it, a panel, they want to share some knowledge, like just keep participating. And all of you who have this year, thank you so much. As Allison said, we do want to wish everyone a happy new year. This is our last episode of the year. And just as a reminder, you know, anyone who wants to get involved is welcome. So thank you all. And I hope you all have a good time with OpenInfra in the new year. Thank you.